Welcome to the Christ in Private Practice podcast, where we empower Christian counselors and share stories of God's work in mental health. I'm your host, Camille McDaniel, licensed professional counselor. Let's dive in. Welcome back, and welcome to anybody who happens to be new to the Christ in Private Practice podcast. I have the honor of being able to speak today to Jenny Schottmiller, who happens to be somebody who has been super helpful to a lot of us in the mental health space. And I first saw her online where we'll talk about it in a little bit, where she was very helpful and even helpful to myself. And she continues to be very helpful. So I was glad to be able to coordinate time with her because she's going to talk to us a little bit about what she does with regards to finances and how she helps others in the accounting space. But before we get into that, let me just introduce you all to Jenny. So Jenny is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she's also a licensed certified public accountant. So I believe she started off as a CPA. Is that correct, Jenny? You did. Yeah. In 2007, she left accounting to focus on health and family. And then after that, she became a marriage and family therapist after some time. And then she opened up her therapy private practice. Well, while she was in that practice, she kind of started realizing that some of her peers were struggling as it related to their own finances. So their accounting, their taxes and budgeting and all of the cash management responsibilities that go with having a practice of your own. So then she kind of decided, okay, maybe I'm not going to all the way leave the CPA behind, but she decided to, in addition to her clinical practice, start running something for us called Simple Profit, which offers free resources and low-cost educational services to just support small business owners. And like I said, that's how I found her online while she was in the process of helping many of us. So thank you so much, Jenny, for taking the time to show up on this podcast with us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So then we'll jump right on in, and I'll ask the first thing is really like, what inspired you to create the Simple Profit Facebook group? Because that group is huge, but it didn't start huge, right? It just has grown over some years. What was kind of the inspiration that led you to create this community?
So there were kind of a couple domino effect kind of things where when I first went into private practice and I started realizing that my peers were struggling, as you mentioned, as many people in private practice do, because we don't usually have a business background before becoming therapists and going into private practice. And the same is true for most small businesses. Most small businesses that start out, those business owners did not get a business degree before they became business owners. They learned a skill, or they developed some knowledge, or they got a degree in an area where it lends itself to starting a business, but that doesn't mean that they had a business degree before doing so. And at first, when I started hearing my peers' struggles, I was on the mindset that I had switched careers. And so I wasn't really at first super open to it. But as I kept hearing these things from people, I realized that I needed to change my thinking in terms of what I was sort of here to do. And there are people basically saying, I need help.
Okay.
I have the skills to help.
Yes.
And so I started looking for ways to help, and one of the ways to help is to develop like a course. And so I was learning how to do a course, and they said start a Facebook group. So I started the Facebook group at first to give a place for people to gather so that then I could offer free resources and point them in, for my course if they wanted additional help, support, and learning, because you don't really have time to go back to school. Nobody's I'm going to go take an accounting class and maybe a marketing class at community college while I'm running my small business. That doesn't happen.
And raising kids or whoever, taking care of elderly parents and all that. Yeah. No, we don't.
So you need an easy way to learn that isn't necessarily the traditional way.
Okay. So now With all of that, though, there was something else that kind of came up because when I initially reached out to you, I was just reaching out because I thought, okay, this would be a wonderful skill to talk about and allow the community that listens to this podcast to hear about. I didn't even actually know that you were a believer in Christ.
Mhm.
Because I remember when I wrote it, I was just like, I wrote you a message and I'm like, you know what, whether you believe or not, like, folks need to know how to handle their finances and their taxes. So that's across the board. It doesn't matter what your belief is. And it just turned out that you were like, actually, I am a believer in Christ. And I'm like, oh, wow, look at that. I had no idea. So, so with that though, I'm like, oh, well, let me ask her about her journey, in her faith. So, how does like your faith actually shape the approach that you take, like I guess as a CPA and as a therapist?
Well, like as you said, like everyone needs to know the information that I'm teaching and helping, and whatever
Mhm.
anyone's belief, they can use therapy and they can use CPAs.
Oh,
I don't talk about this a lot, but I thought I'll go ahead and share it here. I come from a family of some ministers. We have ministers in our backgrounds. My great
okay.
grandfather was a minister, and his son, my uncle was a great uncle was a minister, and so my grandmother is the daughter of a minister, and
Okay.
I have not always been the same denomination of Christianity. We've evolved. My
Okay.
family, we went to my family's church when I was little, and then my mother, who was divorced, didn't feel very supported in that community, and so we went to another, Christian community where
Yes.
I spent high school, junior high and high school, and great just youth groups and choir, and really a time in your life when you really can use that kind of thing.
Okay.
And then I became a different denomination when I got married the first time, and then now I am a different denomination as in my second marriage. So I have always had Christianity and belief in Jesus and Christ, and core values related to helping and wanting to do good in the world,
Okay.
regardless of where I've actually attended
Hmm.
services. And
Yes.
in looking at your questions before today, I thought, okay, well, what kind of represents who I am? And I found Proverbs
Mm.
3.27, do not withhold good from those to whom it is due when it is in your power to do it. And I think
Oh,
that really fits with
okay.
where I was when I started Simple Profit, where I wasn't hearing the struggles. I was focused on what I had thought was my focus. And
Yes.
then I needed to shift. And it was important
Okay.
for who I am to shift and say, I have this knowledge and ability. And in addition to knowledge and ability, I have a weirdly large capacity for helping.
Okay.
And I work a lot of hours. I have a large family on top of that. And people will say, do you sleep? How do you do it?
Right.
I don't
Now I
know.
will, I'm not gonna lie. I have wondered that because I'm like, how is she everywhere? You
How
know?
is she everywhere, and how is she so responsive? And I try to be very responsive to,
Yes.
messages, and I've had to develop some systems to manage my ADHD so I can manage it, but I
Okay.
just have a large capacity, and I think that comes from just what I was blessed with. Just that's what I got.
Mhm.
That's what I got. And
Oh,
and my single mother, who just couldn't stop, right? She had to do what she
yeah.
had to do, and she was
Hmm.
a great inspiration and example for me. So that's sort of where my journey has led me
Thank
here.
you. That's a wonderful journey. I mean, definitely multi-layered, but like at the end of it, I love the scripture that you shared with that because it's saying where you can do good, do it. Don't withhold the gifts and talents that you have from the world around you, because we definitely do need it. Okay. So then tell us about, the financial wisdom. Like separately, because we definitely we need to know more about, especially I'll say for those who do have a belief in Christ, it's also important for us to be able to bring things back to our belief. So it kind of makes sense as to why should you do a certain thing this way if you happen to be aligning yourself with Christ. So like what do you see as far as faith and financial wisdom when it comes to business owners that may be Christian business owners or Christian counselor mental health professionals?
So I think one of the things that's important is to think about why you're in business. So we
Mm.
know that we go into business because we think we can support ourselves and our families with that. But for most of us, there are other secondary reasons to help, to reach more people, to create a business that has the accessibility to the population that we want to reach. Whatever it
Yeah.
is that is your individual goal, if you have that written down on a post-it somewhere maybe in the front of your mind, although it's probably better if it's written down somewhere where you can regularly check it and say,
Mhm.
are the decisions that I'm making aligned with why I'm doing this? Because it's just so easy to get off track. It's
Yes.
life gets in the way, we get busy, we get focused on what we think our goal is, and sometimes we lose track of these secondary, or they might be primary for you, goals of why you're doing it. And I
Okay.
think one of the biggest challenges for business owners is being overwhelmed, because
Yes.
we're talking about topics when we think about taxes and accounting that aren't familiar. And if you
Mhm.
think back to the very first time you sat in a session with a client, and before you walked into that session, the things that were going through your mind were not, I got this, probably,
Right.
maybe, but it wasn't for me.
But
Not like, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to do if this or
yeah.
that happens. It's literally like,
Yes.
okay, I think I'm walking into a situation that I'm potentially going to have no idea how to respond or what to say that will be useful, helpful, therapeutic. Um, and I'm going to hold my breath and hope for the best.
Yes.
So
Yes.
when you think about accounting and taxes, think about the fact that you now potentially are a comfortable clinician who knows you can handle a variety of scenarios, but you haven't always felt that way. And so when you're
Absolutely.
learning initially accounting and tax topics, they're overwhelming because they're new and they're unfamiliar, not because you're incapable of learning them. We can break it down, we can find ways to make it make sense. I one time had someone tell me that their parent, who was a CPA, had been trying to explain to them accounting for their entire lives. And I did a video using red Solo cups to explain
Wow.
accounting. And she said, oh, I get it now. I get it now. So, one of the things about learning is that we need to find the way that you learn it.
Yes.
And then it makes
That's
sense to
perfect.
you. And everyone can learn these topics.
Okay. That sounds good. Now, okay, but as you mentioned taxes, that
Yep.
kind of like feeds right into the next thing I wanted to ask because taxes are kind of overwhelming. Not even kind of. I mean, they're just not like you going back to what you said before. We didn't go to school for that. That's not generally where our gifts and talents lie. Although for some of us, this is a second go round job, but for others, it's a not. So we really do lean on and trust those individuals that we're going to. Some of us have wonderful experiences with that, and some of us do not, right? So, for a lot of us who are, owners and contractors, what are some things we need to be aware of when it comes to deductions or when it comes to like tax benefits that people in our field may not always be aware of, but could really benefit us if we were.
Right. And kind of what's important about what you just said is that sometimes you have a good experience with an outside professional that you hire to help you.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you do not. And the everyone needs to know a few basics, because if you know a few basics, you can determine if the person that you have hired to help you is giving you good advice. And if you
Okay.
don't know a few basics, then you don't know if you're getting
Yeah.
good advice. And in any profession, there are people who
Yeah.
will give good care, good advice, good treatment, good help, good support. And there are those
Yes.
who do not. So there are two things you need from a tax professional or an accounting professional. One is you need to be treated with respect, and you're treating
Yes.
others with respect, and you deserve
Yeah.
treatment with respect. So if you're not getting respectful professional treatment, doesn't matter how good they are at what their other skills are. And then you also need them. You could have someone that's very, very nice and just
Mm-hmm.
doesn't know what they're doing. So, particularly with deductions, the main thing that people miss with deductions is the general concept of how do you know if it's a business deduction? And the general
Yeah.
concept helps us then determine, well, if I buy this, is it going to be a business deduction? We might still need to ask a more specific question, but if we have the general concept, we usually can navigate the the nitty-gritty stuff a little better. So the general concept is business deductions are things that help you run your business that aren't personal. So the IRS views us taking care of ourselves, self-care, medical care, grooming, dressing, those kinds of things are things we would have to do whether we had a W-2 job or a business or whether we didn't
Yes.
even work. We would still need to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
We would still get haircuts. So those things are considered personal. So I usually think about if it's for your mind or body, it's probably most likely personal, with a couple exceptions. For example, self-employed people can many times deduct their health insurance premiums. So there's a few exceptions, but then we say, okay, so we take out the personal stuff. What helps me run the business? Software, advertising,
Mhm.
insurance. I wouldn't buy malpractice insurance if I wasn't in business.
Right.
Office supplies, my training, all those kinds of things are going to be, does it help me run the business? And is it not personal? I can usually then determine whether it's a deduction. And then I might have to, learn a little beyond that, but that's the basic concept.
Okay, that's good actually, because when you even mention things that are personal, I see where sometimes there are questions that go out like, hey, I felt like needed a massage after a rough week with work. Can I take the massage as a tax deduction? Or can I take my outfits if I had to buy new clothes for work? Like, can I take that as a tax deduction? And so um, it's good to help us to know so that we're not committing unintentionally fraud.
And you can think about too, if I worked for, let's say, a large mental health community, a community mental health center, or if I work for a hospital system, would they pay for me to have those things? Like, I would
Uh,
definitely, if I work for a hospital, have a rough week now and again. And I
yeah.
would probably need a massage or a therapy session or something like that. But would they pay for me to do that? No, they're not going to pay for my outfits unless I have to wear scrubs and then it's a uniform, which is different. We don't usually wear uniforms in private practice. And so would they pay for that? No. But would they potentially reimburse me if I had to drive from the hospital to a client location or a community center? Yes, they would reimburse me for that drive because I am doing that drive specifically for my job. Would they
Makes
potentially
it.
buy food for a meeting? Yes. So there are that's one way you can kind of
That's a good way of looking at it.
benchmark it.
Yeah. That makes it a lot more clear too, because if especially when you just gave the last example, like, yeah, jobs actually do pay for food when we're having meetings or when we're having certain gatherings, but no, they don't generally pay for like, oh, okay, my massage or my whatever other service to make me feel better. So that's okay. Now, when it comes to still along the lines of like, whether we're a W-2 or 1099, this one is 1099 because the contractors, we kind of have some different tax challenges there. So, with regards to 1099 contractors, like what tips would you give us for the independent contractor so that we can really maximize our deductions?
The independent contractor's biggest challenge is thinking of themselves as in being in private practice and being business owners because you know that you're working for someone and getting your revenue there. So
Yes.
you tend to think of yourself more like I'm working for somebody
Yes.
rather than I am independent. So the independent part gets lost in the contractor part. So it's independent contractor. Even if you're getting your revenue for someone from some other group or company, you want to think about it is you're in private practice. It's just that you get your revenue from this source, just like maybe a group practice might get their revenue from an insurance company. You're getting your revenue from a group practice. Everything else after that is the same, and you're entitled to all the same deductions as any private practice owner. So when you're researching or Googling or trying to learn about it, you need to think of yourself as a private practice owner so that you're thinking, I get all these deductions. The other thing is that contractors have a lot of things already covered. They might not have to pay for a separate EHR. They might not have a lot of expenses outside of maybe malpractice. They might not have to buy office supplies or clinical supplies. But you can think about, well, what are your needs as a private practice owner that works as a contractor, and training, your own professional development, joining professional organizations that are aligned with your business goals for now or in the future are things that you can deduct, and you can enhance your clinical work. If you do need to buy clinical supplies, you can deduct those, anything used in
Mhm.
sessions. So thinking about, you are in control of your contractor practice and
Okay.
what do you need along with what are your goals.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, and thank you for clarifying that. Because that does make sense. Okay, so then the next thing that we all kind of need to know as we are running our businesses, how to set ourselves up right for retirement. And obviously, I know this is not a retirement planning session, but just but just on kind of a high level, like what are some of the options out there? Could you just kind of walk us through some of those key considerations that we really do need to think about when we are planning for retirement? Because I feel like we're sometimes so focused on trying to run our business that we don't always, not to say that we never, a lot of us think about retirement, we understand what that is, but we don't always plan for it the way we need to. So, like, what are some things that we need to consider from your perspective?
So there are a couple things I think that are things to consider. One is that you can just save $1,000 if that's all you have. It's okay to just save $1,000. If you save $1,000 every year for the next 30 years, you're going to have some money,
Right.
and especially if
Okay.
it's invested. And if you start with $1,000, the next year maybe it's 1,500, and the next year maybe it's
Mhm.
3,000. And starting small and building is better than not starting. But we also don't want to beat ourselves up if we haven't started. So if we look back in the past and we say, I wish I would have started 10 years ago, well, it's not going to be really helpful for us to think about that, even though it might
Yes.
be true. And even though we might want to spend a minute on it, we don't want to dwell on that. We want to think about now and going forward, what will make me feel good in 10 years that I started today? So, couple things. One, there are personal retirement plans and business retirement plans. The personal retirement plans are a traditional or a Roth IRA, and you can usually put like seven-ish thousand dollars, a little more if you're age 50 and up, a year in one of those plans, or a mixture. Like you could do 3,000 one, 3,000 in the other. And the difference between them is a traditional IRA saves taxes now, and a Roth IRA saves taxes later. So you pay tax now, but you don't pay tax in retirement. My opinion from a tax perspective is it's good to have some of both. If you
Okay.
are the more you make, the harder it is to put money in a Roth. But if you can put a little money in a traditional, a little money in a Roth, then that means you have tax benefits now and tax benefits later, and that's a nice thing to have.
Yeah.
And that means that in retirement, when you're looking at your finances, you'd be like, well, I'll take this money out and I'm going to pay tax on it. But I have this other pot of money that I can pull and I don't pay tax, and I can manage my taxes in retirement. So that's why that's helpful. Now, if you've maxed out what you can put in there, and it changes every year, so you have to look at what, when you listen to this
Right.
podcast, what's the amount that you can save for this year based on your filing status and your age. But if you max out the personal retirement, which I would recommend doing
Mhm.
that first, then, and if you have a little more, you can open a business retirement. And the main business retirements are SEP IRA, simple IRA, and 401k. And I'm saying them in those order because that's simplest to most complex. And you want to pick the simplest plan that meets your needs. So a
Oh, yeah.
SEP IRA is great for any business owner that doesn't have employees that have worked for you for 3 or more years. So that's most contractors. Most contractors don't have other employees working for them. And so a SEP IRA lets you save up to about 18.5% of your business profit, which is kind of a lot of money.
Yeah, it
And it's
is.
like opening a bank account. It's super easy. It's the same as your traditional IRA. And so if you can say, oh, I happen to max out my traditional IRA and then I'm going to open a SEP, great, you're done. If you have a practice where you have employees or you want to save more than the SEP allows, then you look at the simple IRA, which lets you save a little more, but has a little more complexity to it. Or if you want to save the most, it's a 401k, which has the most complexity, the most cost, but it lets you save the most too. So the main thing is max out one of those personal
Mm.
retirement plans first. And after that, simple IRA or SEP IRA first. If that doesn't cover what you need to save, then think about a simple. If that doesn't cover it, think about a 401k.
Awesome. Because that's exactly what I was going to say. Like, okay, now what do all of these mean? And what are what do we? Okay, okay.
The more
And
you can save, the more complex and costly the plan is. So if
okay,
you have that, I'm going to do these two first, and then I'm going to think through these three. At least you have a little bit of a roadmap.
that sounds good. And then as it relates to those accounts where you do have taxes once you take it out later on in retirement, I know that sometimes that is a concern for people, but isn't it also the case where by the time you get to retirement age, the amount of tax you'd have to pay is lower?
Usually your income is lower in retirement. and that means
Mm-hmm.
less tax. So the more income, the
Okay.
more earned income you have, the more taxable income you have, the higher your taxes. And
Okay.
so what
Mm-hmm.
confuses people is like, but I know there's all these billionaires out there that aren't paying taxes because they earned their money in the past and they're living off investments and they've already bought
Mm-hmm.
their
Yeah.
gigantic mansion and
Yes.
so they paid taxes when they earned it, and now we don't tax wealth in this country right now. We just tax income. So whatever your taxable income is, the higher your taxable income, the higher your tax. So usually in retirement, yes, your income is lower, so your tax rate is typically lower. But again, it depends on personal circumstances and what people's finances are. People who have inherited money, or if over your career you do save a lot, you might have a decent amount of retirement income.
Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah,
Now, just real quick. Now, Jenny, you don't personally do that. Like, so you have all the knowledge, but when people listen to this, I know people have asked in the group, so I want to just clarify it on the podcast episode. They're like, Jenny, can you help me? Can you be my CPA? Like, that's not what you do, though, right?
I do education and support. I
All right,
help you
everyone.
run your daily business options,
Yes.
operations, and I help make decisions. All
Okay.
the things that your tax professional will not really have time for most of the time
Yes.
to do for you. So, for example, I have places people can ask questions. Free questions are limited, of course, but then I have other resources where you can ask unlimited questions. And I want people to help with that navigation of these issues and questions and making decisions. So I have spreadsheets and things that help people get numbers together so they can decide, like, should I leave my W-2 job and go full time into
Yeah.
private practice? So I have a spreadsheet that helps people see, well, after taxes, you would have this money in option A and this money in option B. There's not a lot of people who prepare taxes who take the time to do that kind of detailed analysis as accurately as they possibly can because they're busy
Right.
doing taxes. And if I did taxes, I couldn't do
Right.
this. So I'm
Right.
filling a gap of something that is out there not getting done by very many people. So then I
Yeah.
leave it to
It's
one
not.
or two
And
people.
I think because it's not being done by very many people, when people encounter all the resources that you are providing, I notice sometimes, I don't know if you get the question as much anymore, but sometimes they're like, well, Jenny, is that something you do? Can I be seen by you? Can you help me? Because, when people find someone that they trust and that is very helpful, then they're just like, we never want you to go away. Let's just hold on to the, to the
No, I get the
resources.
questions every day, pretty much every day.
Okay. Okay. So we're making it clear. Anyone listening to the episode, she has phenomenal resources, though, phenomenal education structures for you to take advantage of. But no, she cannot be your personal CPA. So I guess with that, can you tell us, like, where can we find all of the information that you're talking about? So you do have the Facebook group, but you also have a website.
Yes.
And so can you tell us a bit more about how people can connect, how people can learn more about what you're offering?
Yes, so the Facebook group is Simple Profit for Mental Health Clinicians, and in the Facebook group, it's just clinicians. So, and it's limited. It's grown to such a large group that think of it kind of like as a Dear Abby place. You can ask you could submit a question, and then I pick questions to answer. I can't
Yes.
answer every question because it's Facebook and it's very, very, very time consuming.
Yes.
But on my website, I have a free guide, simple guide with frequently asked questions. You can post a question in there. I'll answer it. Now, it's not, I can't do like significant research questions or things
Hmm.
that might take an hour to answer, but there are basic questions already answered in there. And you can ask further basic questions in my simple guide, which is free to anyone. And that is not only for clinicians. So if you have a friend who is a fitness instructor and a physical therapist, you can refer them to the website. And then if you need more than that, I have a low cost membership also right on my website that you can ask unlimited questions. You can get the tools, the spreadsheets, the help support with QuickBooks or Wave apps or other accounting options and cash flow, budgeting, and I have educational webinars every
Yes.
month.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I do know, and I'll just add that for the Facebook group, even though it's grown so big now, you're really not able to get to all of the questions. However, since your group has been around for such a good period of time, if people go to the search function, there are so many things that you have answered that people have, asked under almost any category, I feel like, and all you have to do is just type in a little word and just see what people have already asked and see what Jenny has already answered. So,
And
that's
on
super
that
helpful.
too, in the top of the Facebook group, there's a thing that says guide. And in the guide, I have organized main posts that answer a lot of the questions. And then those guides are what I moved over to also the simple guide on my website too. So there, wherever
Okay.
you need to go, wherever you feel most comfortable going, there's a lot of information.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much, Jenny, for taking the time. This has been very helpful. You are very helpful in general, and I appreciate being able to talk to you today.
Thank you so much.